Okay, we are going to try something a little bit different with today's video. Hello everybody, I am Jmulls of Jmulls Gaming, and I want to talk about a lesson that I have learned in Final Fantasy XIV. You see, I have played MMORPGs for years at this point. My early days, when I was just a kid, I devoted many hours into a game called RuneScape. Specifically into the version of the game that later on had to be called Old School RuneScape. Cut forward a few years later, and I played a game called World of Warcraft on a friend's suggestion. Many years after that one, another friend got me into Final Fantasy XIV, where I proceeded to play all the different jobs. And you may be going, Jmulls, where exactly are you going with this? Well, the funny thing is, periodically throughout my journey into various MMORPGs, I experimented with tanking. I was always casual with it, but every now and then I would experience tanking and enjoy it. But tending to prefer DPS because I viewed it to be less stress, I would always move away from it. Though funnily enough, I would actually start to embrace the role when it came to Final Fantasy XIV simply because my main aesthetic preferences were mostly the tanks, namely Dark Knight, but also Paladin and even Warrior. And then later on with Shadowbringers Gunbreaker. I'm also a massive fan of the Dark Knight role quests, and they're arguably on par with my feelings for both the Shadowbringers and Endwalker MSQs. But that hesitation I felt going into random queues as a tank would still last for me for many years. The time I would tank the most would, funnily enough, actually be in Shadowbringers, where alongside that buddy of mine that got me into the game, I would actually tank a few extremes. Now, they would be pugs, but I would tank alongside him and he would show me the ropes, and I, on my Dark Knight, really gravitated to that playstyle, and I really enjoyed it. I still have the Titania EX Dark Knight weapon as a memento of that happy memory for me. But when Endwalker came around, I moved away from tanking as a role, and because I didn't play too much of the endgame of Endwalker, I mainly relegated myself to Reaper and Dragoon and DPS jobs on the whole. And it wouldn't be until Dawntrail release that I would find my way back to tanking. And funnily enough, the tank I would level up first was actually the one I had neglected throughout all of Endwalker. You see, I had gotten Warrior, Paladin, and Dark Knight at least to level 90. Gunbreaker, though, that one was relegated to the annals of history, languishing at level 80 for me. I chose to level that one up first, and I think this coincided with a recent shift in my gaming preferences and a stronger desire to test my limits and become more mechanically focused, let's say, when it came to my gaming. So I started to play more tank. I would do fates around the open world to, well, collect resources and those whatever gem resources you get for doing fates in the new Dawntrail zones. I would do that on my Dark Knight. We'll get into Dark Knight in a bit. But the bulk of my time leveling a tank has come in the form of Gunbreaker, doing the dungeons, doing some raids here and there, my roulettes, and I found myself heavily captivated by the job, but also the role. You see, one of the things I've trained myself to do better over the years is to be able to express and to put into words what it is I enjoy about anything that I do enjoy. When it came to tanking, it was those small decisions you made on a moment-to-moment basis about when to pop mitigation, or on Gunbreaker, how and when to actually, do my burst window. I didn't look up guides or a proper opening. I just kind of freeballed it, and I think it's because of that I enjoyed Gunbreaker so much. It is very hectic and active, but also just really cool. Look, Gunbreaker utilizes a sword that also shoots off explosive ammunition. There is no universe out there that I wouldn't find that greatly appealing. And as someone who tends to prefer jobs where I can hit a lot of buttons, Gunbreaker really appealed to me with all the continuation stuff. Now, I enjoyed continuation back in the days of Shadowbringers, but I found moving bosses around the arena with continuation be a bit of a pain in my balls. However, with the fight design of Dawntrail coinciding with them just kind of leaning into continuation as a concept and having my buttons shift to other buttons as I press them, the busyness of Gunbreaker coinciding with its actual utility and just rotation on the whole is something that I found keenly satisfying. And the more abilities I would unlock on my road to level 100 that I have now reached, the more I would enjoy the role and the job as well. Every little micro burst window that I had at my disposal was something that I genuinely enjoyed. And I think one of the reasons I'm really starting to gravitate towards tanking as a role is because I feel as if I get extra mechanics. I'm always on the lookout, always cautious and observant for when I can best utilize my utility, my defensives. How I can position a boss, especially if I have melee that utilizes positionals, like Vipers or Reapers or Dragoons or Monks. Always on the lookout how I can improve my own performance, never satisfied, always looking for those micro-optimizations to better my own playstyle, to make the party flow even better, and just enjoy the game even more. And it's these decisions I can make on a constant basis that keeps me from being bored with any encounter. Always focused on what I'm doing, always paying attention. But funnily enough, it never feels too much to me. And that same pressure that I used to find came side by side with tanking before is no longer really there. And I don't think that's a change because of the game, but again, because of my own preferences when it comes to what I'm looking for and what I want to get out of my gaming. And now that I've gotten Gunbreak to level 100, I did my weekly reset of the raid Arcadian on Gunbreaker and heavily enjoyed it. I would largely off tank, but on occasion when the main tank would die or whatever, I would easily step up to the plate and main tank, and funnily enough, everything felt smoother when I main tanked it. And maybe that can be viewed as a pat on my own proverbial back, but to me, there's something satisfying about knowing that I can step up to the plate when it comes to main tanking and for things to feel even smoother. It's like when you're stuck in a queue and you finally get, actually into the servers and can finally start playing. Funnily enough, the rotation doesn't change, but the mindset does, and what I'm looking out for does. And even when I'm off tanking, I like paying attention to when the main tank is getting tank busters placed upon them, or if the healer is stepping in something nefarious and, well, just bad. I have tools at my disposal to try and prop them up and save them and get them out of harm's way. And I like that. And when it comes to Gunbreaker, everything just feels right to me. The buttons feel good to press. I love continuation and the mechanical feedback I get by doing it. Double Down's a bit of an interesting choice because it requires 2 cartridge gauge to spend, but the more I use it, the more I get used to it, the more I kinda like it. I feel myself getting better, but also smarter when it comes to the tools at my kit every time I have an encounter or a new dungeon pops up, or whatever. And I do plan to level up all of my tanks and to make videos about each tank individually, about what I like and what I dislike about them, but I've also spent a little bit of time on Dark Knight. Now, as you may be aware from previously in this video, Dark Knight was something that I have a bit of history with. I also played it back in Stormblood, and while I do miss that iteration of Dark Knight, I still like the job. However, I feel in Dawntrail for my limited time with it, it almost feels as if it's lost its way, as if it doesn't have a strong identity, mechanically speaking, that is solely unique to the Dark Knight profession. Now, I am not coming from a balanced perspective, though the lack of self-sustain is absolutely evident. To me, it's the job that I've played that felt the most in the need of a rework. It needs a spark, it needs some kind of life breathed into it, because to me, it feels as if it's lost its way. Again, I am not talking from a balanced perspective, I am talking about how it feels to press my buttons. And when I play Dark Knight, it feels like I'm playing a worse amalgamation of mechanics that the other tanks bring to the table, but just in better ways. And looking ahead to the abilities I still have to unlock with the dang thing, I don't think my concerns about it will become alleviated. Combining Delirium and Blood Weapon sounds good on paper, but it makes that burst window feel a bit stale and uninteresting. And whenever I don't take enough damage to proc the Blackest Night, it feels just bad. I don't know if a reversion to the days of old for Dark Knight, such as in Stormblood, is necessarily the way to go, especially in the landscape of modern Final Fantasy XIV, but I'm not sure the modern iteration of Dark Knight is necessarily the way to go either. Perhaps a new direction altogether is required, or just a single mechanic should be introduced in the Dark Knight, in whatever form that may take itself as. Just Dark Knight feels like it needs something to me. It feels too spammy. The mitigation that it has feels weirdly niche when it comes to magic resistance. Or I have to perform these mental calculations when it comes to its mitigation, like the Blackest Night, that I simply don't have to make to reap the dividends on the other tanks. And we can talk about job identity all we want, but a job's identity shouldn't be that it feels worse to play than the others, or that it feels more clunky for little reward. Even if numbers-wise it is really good, which I'm not even sure Dark Knight is that right now. But even in a hypothetical world where Dark Knight was the #1 tank numbers-wise, even if we want to take that as a hypothetical, I think mechanically in terms of how the buttons are structured, it's just not as interesting to me compared to the other tanks, and that could be simply my own opinion. At the end of the day, that's all this video is. But to me, it's a conversation that I think is worthy to have, especially in an expansion that I think Square Enix is taking job-based criticism close to the heart, because they seemingly want to do a bunch of job changes later on in the game's life. At least that is the impression I got from the various interviews they've done before Dawntrail came out. So I think for me, the lesson that I learned is that sometimes you have to be willing to go outside of your own comfort zone to try something new, because who knows, maybe a playstyle that seemed intimidating before may actually be something that really clicks with you once you give it the chance. And all of a sudden, a playstyle that could have seemed so dreary and one-dimensional and boring to you, which is what DPS was becoming for me, can all of a sudden blossom into something very interesting and fun and engaging that you want to actively get better at simply because you find that journey of self-improvement enjoyable. And while I don't think tanks are necessarily in the most perfect position of all time, there's absolutely still that criticism of job homogenization. 100%. I think tanking is still really fun, and I'm particularly excited about playing Warrior and Paladin after I finish up Dark Knight because I'm getting that artifact gear. Don't even get it twisted, I'm leveling up Dark Knight simply for that level 99 set. But the changes made to Warrior and Paladin from a cursory glance by me seem really cool and fun. And I like the visual just flair that tanks in the whole have received when it comes to Dawntrail. It's something that I do think is necessary and required because looking at your character do cool stuff and new stuff every expansion is something to look forward to. And with the tanks by default just tending to have the aesthetics I care the most about for all the Final Fantasy XIV jobs, sans maybe Dragoon and Reaper, overall I think I'm now in a happier place when it comes to Final Fantasy XIV because I've embraced tanking and I've been really enjoying it. Now if you'll excuse me, I have to level up my Dark Knight to level 97 so I can run that dungeon repeatedly to get the fending set from there because I want my Cyborg Gundam Power Armor Fantasy, thank you very much. And with that, I will call the video there for the day. Thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure for making the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Stay safe, have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Until we meet again!